Om Adihi Sa Samyoga Nimitta Hetu Paras Trikala Dakala Pidrista Tam Vishvarupam Bhavabhuta Midyam Devam Svachitastam Upasya Purvam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Meditate upon the Lord as thine own self, seated in your heart, who appears to you as the universe and is the ultimate source of all living beings. Perceive that one as the primal cause of the relationship between matter and consciousness, and as the partless divine entity who transcends the three phases of time, past, present, and future. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, and may Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. And now the third Sunday of our series has arrived, and we want to put a conclusion on this topic of Zen ox herding and Atmic lion taming. The Zen ox herding being, of course, a traditional teaching in Buddhism. Zen, well known since the 12th century China, when the Roshis, the teachers, brought out those specific teachings on finding the ox amongst people who thought they had lost it, but actually it was still there, as is the nature of Bussho in Zen, or what we'd call Atman in Vedanta. But the Atmic lion taming is a phrase that's a little bit more current, coined by Swami Vivekananda just in late 1800s and early 1900s when he was here. So we've done deference to the Zen ox herding over the last 2 weeks with a little bit of insertion of Vedic thinking, Vedantic thinking, Advaitic thinking even, with the chart we had last week with those 9 stages that you remember. So 10 stages of ox herding, complemented by the 9 stages of realizing the Atman. And we've been flashing this chart every week a little bit, because this is the complementary chart to Zen ox herding, which I chose for this series of classes. Now there being some approaching 400 charts now. About 320 of them you can find in the Footfalls book, which is now available to people. And you can chart the scriptures with the ancient rishis all the way back to millennia prior to the Christian age, which we are all looking keenly at nowadays to find clues to problems in the present, contemporary times, maybe the beyond solution in problems when you find the Dharma, particularly when you take it from Dharma to a deeper level called Atmagyan, or Brahmagyan. That is when the Dharma gets meditated upon and matured inside of your thinking process. Manana means mind, and manana means to roll it around in your mind. So when that happens, then you'll have this transition into clear understanding. Khyati, both Buddhism and Vedanta use that Sanskrit word. It means clarity, basically. So you'll get a clarity around the teachings that in the beginning just interested you and attracted you, maybe, which is a good thing. Hopefully you stayed with it and had that perseverance, which Masharda, or the Ishvari Ishtam of this particular SRV organization, was always speaking about perseverance, forbearance, staying with it, and then experiencing this maturation process in the mind into nididhyasanam. So you have Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhav, and you have Shravana, Manana, and nididhyasanam. But Swami Vivekananda just put that Shruti, Smriti, and Anubhav. That's what he always called it. So he was always mixing these two systems of three great truths, or proofs of truth sometimes, or the three great sources. And according to Swami Vivekananda, love is the end result of all search for the Atman. And you get to it, though, by Shruti, Smriti, and Anubhav, quoting him directly from his letters. So that's what the Advaitists and the Vedantists are all trying to realize, or going after, realizing and living in it, abiding in the Atman, we call it in our tradition, and turning this sheep of ego, that is this you, as the chart says there, EWE, with the pun intended, of course, and turning it from before and after kind of picture there, the mouse of egotism and then the lion of the Atman. This kind of maturation or transformation has to go on. And that was part of what Vivekananda called his man-making process. And he wanted to, metaphorically speaking, have people turn into lions of Vedanta. As all these quotes on this chart will tell us. In fact, maybe we should take those first just to press the point. Have faith in yourself, he says. All power is in you. Be conscious and bring it out. Even if you are at your last breath, be not afraid, but work on with the intrepidity of a lion, but at the same time the tenderness of a flower. So there's one of his 4 or 5 lion quotes. I looked through his letters and talks and found some others too. This one he says, "What I want is muscles of iron, nerves of steel, inside which dwells a mind of the same material as that of which the thunderbolt is made." And other quotes where he brings in the lion, "Guru Bhakti is the foundation of all spiritual development. The Guru Bhakta will conquer the world. This is the one evidence of history. It is faith that makes a lion of a man." And of course, when he's talking about Guru Bhakti will conquer the world, it's an interesting perspective, because basically the devotees never get the world. They renounce the world. So that's the kind of conquering he's talking about. People who enjoy matter and wealth and riches and fame and dominating over others, they get the world. So in this case, you have to think of the Bhakta conquering the world, the Guru Bhakta, as having faith in the Ishtam, in the ideal, in the exemplar who has renounced the world, as they all did, from Ram to Krishna to Buddha to Christ to Shankara to Ramakrishna. Throughout these several millennia, we had these great souls coming up, and coming up in different religions too, that epitomized that idea of renunciation. Let's see, where is it? Right there, Tyaga. If you say Gita many times, you end up saying Tyaga, Chagi, which means renunciation. So Gita, that's the meaning of the Gita. That's the real inherent meaning in it, is renunciation. Whereas other people are saying it's work, karma, some are saying it's bhakti, love, and others saying it's sannyas and so forth. But it's really that renunciation of things changing, things finite, things unreal, things unsubstantial, things misleading, things mayic, and therefore getting all those behind you, get thee behind me, and coming forward with the intrepidity of a lion, and but keeping the tenderness of a flower. So I think that's also a nice Zen koan, Vedantic koan in Zen. You have these beautiful koans in Zen which express the inexpressible very well, and those are intended, for you to do your manana on, and then you'll go and ferret out the meaning, and then go and have zazen, and then you'll have a break and take time alone with the Roshi, and then he'll ask you what the meaning of the koan is that you've been thinking about. So cutting the mind on that is the same in Vedanta. We do it with the Dharma teachings and manana. So intrepidity of a lion, the sensitivity of a flower, tenderness of a flower, these are statements that were perfectly Zen-like in Swami Vivekananda's wordage. He says here, just to get all of the quotes through so we can go on to the teachings here, let there be but a dozen such lion souls in each country, lions who have broken their own bonds, who have touched the infinite, whose whole soul has gone to Brahman, who care neither for wealth nor power nor fame, and these will be enough to shake the world. And he, of course, is talking from experience because he was part of 16 such lion souls. The birthday of one is which of today. Swami Niranjanananda's birthday is today, and he's one of the 16 direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So there was a lion that helped shake the world, along with his 15 brothers. And we had a good handful of them come here to the U.S. In the form of all of these great souls, lion-like souls, who right now still, I think, are shaking the U.S., the country, the America, and countries in Europe, trying to get them to wake up. See, because the song in India says, "Oh, mind, you walk around sleeping. When you're waking, you're sleeping. When you're sleeping, you're sleeping. When you're in deep sleep, you're sleeping. When will you ever wake up?" So to get done with this tamas and this, and not just do it by rajas, that is, well, I got rid of my sleepiness, now I'm restless, back and forth. We need really to get to this balance in which all work, in which any work done in that sattvic balance brings less and less of negative karmas to bear. And there, in any country, then that will be a earth-shaking kind of event because people will begin to think in terms of selflessness rather than selfishness, and think in terms of the Atman being in others as well as in oneself. But it is true that Vivekananda has also emphasized that you must learn to have faith in yourself, as he says in this quote, so you know that the Atman is within you, and once you realize it, then you can truly see it in others. So there is a way of proceeding, and we call that in Vedanta method. And as you've seen by my presentation of Zen, which is based in the teachings of the more ancient teachers of Zen, not only of Buddhism, that is, Chinese Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism, but in Zen too, there is this approach that has method to it. I like the 10 ox herding. What are they? We seek the ox. I'll go through this real quick again so we can face it off. Then you find the tracks if you seek it. Then you glimpse the ox. Finally you catch the ox. And you tame the ox. You ride the ox home. Then you forget the ox. And that's, of course, in the most positive way, because you forget there's two-ness between you and yourself. And then the ox and self are both forgotten. You even forget yourself, which is typically Buddhist. I wouldn't say that that's a teaching that's emphasized much in Vedanta. It's always remember the self, realize the self. But Buddhism takes that tact of, which actually isn't all that different from Advaita Vedanta, that you would forget both the non-self and the true self, because you would go beyond any sense of individuality, so there could be no self. So whichever way you cut it, it's really ending in the same non-dual realization. And also, like mature jnanam in bhakti in Vedanta, Zen Buddhism wants you to return to the source. And so name and form will be stripped away, as Father of Yoga says, and the soul will realize itself. It'll give up the transmigration process, conquer the world, as we just said. Conquer the world by giving it up because it's not real, and transcend the senses and the mind, and see its oneness with divine reality. Not two-ness might be a good way of putting it. The method there, we know about methods which I'll show you a few of in Vedanta, because there are so many in India. In fact, Buddhism could actually be called an Indian method too, or a series of methods. But here it's studying snow conditions, as the koan says, and it's so you are aware of the changes of weather. That means everything outside changing, and you have to be prepared for it. And the best way you'll be prepared for that is if you have had the experience of enlightenment. That's called satori in Zen. If you've had that deep insight of satori, that immediate knowing, they call it, then of course that's the best preparation that you can have. The observing of the snow conditions, which is the method, is now realized, and you are one with the oxen. There's no two-ness. Not two is what they say. So saying oneness sometimes is not quite correct, and it's not quite satisfying in Buddhism. But the beautiful thing about this too, which is very characteristic of Zen and of Indian darshanas, is returning to the source and then entering the marketplace with helping hands. I think that's why Vivekananda epitomizes the perfect integration of the four yogas. You could find the four yogas all along this tract. And this ends in a perfect karma yoga, which seems like Vivekananda was wanting people to get their ignorance destroyed by knowledge, and then find their true nature, and then love mankind, and then serve mankind. Didn't end up with a retiring into a cave kind of sannyas, and that's actually not the kind of sannyas we see Krishna preaching either. So you see, these great souls are very much have it in mind, this wholeness, completeness, which is really the meaning of the word Zen. And if you look at it in terms of Atmic line taming, because we won't spend time here, we did it the first week, but I wanted you to see those 10 stages and remember. An ox, if you think you've lost your true nature, which a lot of people think they have, then they're not that hard to find, because they're very big. As the Zen teaching says, it's huge. Just see, the tracks are huge. You go out into the jungle and it's bigger than the bushes, so it's not that hard to find an ox in Zen. In fact, it should be the most simple and natural thing in the world. But of course, that's if you've fallen into the misconception that you lost it in the first place, which Advaita and Zen concur about perfectly. That's why I'm putting them across the board with each other. That 54 generations or 52 generations, I think it took to get from India to Japan, and then the Vedanta coming over here from India to Alaska and Canada, when Swami Vivekananda put his foot on this continent and took a train ride across and ended up in Chicago at the Parliament of Religions. All that's very beautiful to read about his journey here. And then finding when he got there in 1893 at the Parliament of Religions, they'd canceled it. So he went through all sorts of tests and challenges, like sleeping in a boxcar in a railroad station one night, and then having the grace of God step in and being recognized by just walking through a neighborhood, being recognized by a woman. Oh, are you a Swami? Are you Vivekananda? So brought him in the house, and he found his two great friends who helped reintroduce him to the Parliament religions that had been postponed a while, and gave him all this confidence that he was in the perfect place at the right time. So all of this is a very wonderful history, and the history you can follow it to Japan, and then the first Roshis coming over in the last two generations. So all of that is historical record, but it's also very wonderful to contemplate. So my point here is that it's not that difficult to find something so huge. It might seem to be obscured at first. You just look for the signs in the trackless field of the world, samsara that is, or what we samsara here, maya here, and then you would seek it like you would seek oil and sesame seed, or patina and copper, or gold buried deep in a river, or in a mountain. So then you go about seeking this very fine thing with these methods and these practices. Now, as he did so, and he showed us the way, Swami Vivekananda in recent times, he had some certain favorite teachings that emerged. And so when I was reading things like his letters and, of course his 4 yogas, and then a lot of his complete works, which comes in how many volumes now, I think? Something like 9 volumes we have of the complete works that you can get a mind lift. This is what I used to say about that. If you were to read all 9 of those, then you would be thinking along a completely different track and a much higher intelligence, much better informed about not only things like the meaning of life, but who you are, who your true nature is. Anyway, as he did this, these are the things that I listed that I came upon most, these words, and they were in Sanskrit and in English both. So I was thinking it would be nice for the lion taming side of this, because you see the main image there is a kitty, nice little kitty looking into a mirror and seeing its true self. There are actually some stories in India about a mother, is it a lion? I guess it's a tiger, mother tiger leaping on a flock of sheep, and she gave birth as she leapt, and so this tiger cub did you hear that story? Got born amongst these sheep and started bleeding and eating grass and doing things. Is this you? He might have said. Basically another tiger came later and saw this full-grown tiger amongst the sheep eating grass and dragged it to the river and showed it its reflection. Do you look like a sheep? You should be like me. Look at me. And so this story is a famous story in India, having to do with big cats like this. And so in that vein then you see that when the true self, when you go seeking the true self, ox or lion, whatever method you choose, that you're going to get this welcome surprise when you look upon your true nature. And yes, it might take some method, and I'll show you a couple of those before we end this class, but we want to look at these main facets that Vivekananda enumerated and repeated over and over again. And I wanted to do this somewhat musically too, so we could do the lion taming part of this with some beautiful music, which India is favorite for, but because you won't find a lot of music in Buddhism or Zen, unfortunately. Scriptures, yes, in both, rich in scripture, and chanting too, some chanting, but the music side of it really falls nicely to the Indians, the Hindus, and to the Bhaktas, and also to the Gyanis, because they have what's called stotrams, which they sing, which are nondual realizations put into words, like Namrichor, Nashanka, Name Jati Beda, Pita Naiva Me Naiva. We sing that a lot. I have no death because I was never born. I have no father and mother. So these are stotrams that are speaking from the highest non-dual standpoint of a matured Jnani, who I think has the sensitivity of a flower, tenderness of a flower in him. A true Jnani would not be dry. They would have put together bhakti and jnanam as the two wings of a bird, and soared in the sky of awareness. And as Vivekananda would say, bhakti is checking jnanam. That is, devotion is always checking wisdom to make sure it doesn't get too dry. And wisdom is always checking devotion to make sure it doesn't get too sentimental. So you've got a perfect blend there. And my teacher would say that all the time. Blessings be upon him, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, that the bird needs two wings to fly. He was talking about jnanam and bhakti quite often. You could also use that analogy with form and formlessness and other high-minded dualities that you should think about, and turn into triputis if you can. So these main emphases that I came upon in reading Vivekananda are there. We've read all the quotes and we've shown you the little funny bits at the bottom, how this transformation happens. So now we want to take some of these oft-repeated phrases of Vivekananda that he would mix Sanskrit with English, and then he'd come back with English and Sanskrit, and he was a little bit free in his rendering of what Sanskrit meant in English. So that's a welcome thing for a lot of us, to find out that because Sanskrit does have different meanings than the one usually used traditionally. And the same word can mean many things and have different shades of meaning. So we already used this quote that I read for you out of this chart. Guru Bhakti was one of the things that, like you said, will conquer the world. So that is devotion to the teacher, to the spiritual teacher. There probably, I don't know if it got maybe overshadowed a little bit by the Advaitic message and by all of his wisdom, because he often said that if he do the whole thing over again, he would like to do it with love, more love, more love. But it was his wisdom that impressed us, particularly the Americans and the English, because that's, they're not going to necessarily go towards religion, many of them, because religion has become irreligion in many senses of the term, in a deeper sense of the term. So those beings would turn towards something very scientific, something very practical, and some of them would keep the element of mystical wisdom in it. And that's what he was famous for. So he was, of course, the disciple of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, foremost disciple, sometimes they would say, because, of course, he was the one that left India and took the message of the Master, this new dispensation, we call it, took it around to the entire world and spread it, and is still doing that, even though he's, to quote him, a voice without a form. Now, I would prefer to be a voice without a form, he would say. So he can borrow our forms and speak and communicate and so forth. So devotion to the teacher was huge in him, and but he was his wisdom and discrimination kept him from spreading the name of Sri Ramakrishna too much in the beginning, because he didn't want it to turn into idolatry and personality worship. He always used to say principles are much more important than personalities. So he wanted to keep the whole thing very pure, and with the emphasis on jnanam, so that ignorance could be removed, because if you remove ignorance with jnanam, then love will just come dancing forward, is kind of what his method was. Or in Krishna too says that, nahi jnanena sudrishyam pavitramiha vidyate. In the Gita, he says that wisdom is the greatest purifier. And so it would purify that ignorance that's lingering in the mind, that haze, that sense of not knowing, that nescience, that mayic fog that floats in people, makes them go to sleep and not pay attention and that kind of thing. So that would be dispensed by this higher devotion blended with wisdom. And he was not alone in that, because just some, I don't know, 1,200 years earlier, 1,100 years earlier, Shankar was doing the same thing when he was doing his. Guru Charanam Bhujanir Bara Bhaktaha Samsharadacharad Bhava Muktaha Sendriya Manasaniyama Devam Drakyashi Nilakaya Hayastam Devam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Mudhamate Samprapte Sanihite Kale Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukarin Karane. In one of his verses, Shankara sings very nicely. Through deep devotion to the lotus feet of your preceptor, become released soon from the transmigratory process. Thus, through the discipline of mind and senses, you will finally behold the deity who resides in your own heart. What a perfect blending, and it works in English just as well as in Sanskrit. What a perfect blending of bhakti, guru bhakti, and knowledge and transcendence, getting beyond the transmigratory process. And Advaita, how in your own, this is like I started out chanting today, Adihi Sasam Yoga Namitta to meditate upon the Lord as thy own self seated in your heart. And that one line in the Upanishads just shows you the Advaitic thread or substratum running through everything in the Upanishads. Even when they're talking about dualism, it's based upon that foundation of non-dualism. So even when you're talking about bhakti, you're talking about the jnanam that underlies it, and vice versa. Who can tell the difference, really? At the highest level trajectory of these passive bhakti and jnanam, you'll find prema bhakti and atma jnana, which then would be the same thing. This divine love for the Lord, blended with love of unity, love of the divine self. So this is one way it's put as far as Guru Bhakti. I told you I was going to musically let you contemplate these. If you want to put it in a little more tender way, as Devendranath Mazumdar used to do, Bhava Sagaratarana Karana He Ravi Nandana Kandana Bandana He Sharanagata Keen Kara Beta Mane Guru Deva Daya Kara Dina Jane Jaya Sadguru Ishvara Prabhapaghe Bhavaroga Vyakara Vinashakahe Yana Yena Rahitava Shri Charane Guru Deva Dayakara Dina Jane. He sings beautifully about the Guru here, and he sings, O Supreme Master, you are the means by which to cross the ocean of this world. You are the sun of knowledge that destroys all ignorance. And I, your servant and devotee, with a fearful mind, come to you for refuge. O divine teacher, kindly show compassion on your humble devotee. Victory to thee, O illumined teacher, who is the leader of our souls, the one who destroys the effects of the disease of worldliness in us. May my mind readily remain fixed upon your holy feet of sanctuary. O teacher divine, kindly shower compassion on my humble devotee. And he has beautiful other Kula kundalini goma banja kahe Redu granti vidarada kara kahe Mama manasa chanchala ratra dine Guru deva daya kara dina jane Guru deva daya kara dina jane. So you might, if you know a little bit of Sanskrit, you might know that Kula Kundalini Guma Banjakahe, it is the powerful spiritual force at the base of the spine awakens at thy touch. And the bondage of desire disappears when you grant detachment and discrimination. But my mind remains restless despite these supreme blessings. O teacher divine, kindly shower compassion on thy humble devotee. Oh, every verse of Devendranath Mazumdar, one of the great devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, ends with this: O teacher divine, shower compassion upon thy humble devotee. But mixed with all of this great Guru Bhakti that's pouring forth from him in this way through a kind of a stotram or a bhajan, is all this wisdom about that he knows about. That he knows that this kundalini is stored at the base of his subtle spine, not his gross spine. It doesn't run through bones. It runs through lotuses. So if you raise it up, then it with various methods like breathing, taking mantra over your food and turning it into prasad, and meditating, reading scripture, all these various methods which are prescribed really both in Zen and in Vedanta, then this force will rise. The Kundalini Shakti, will rise in you. And then Amrit, you see, even a drop of this nectar comes up, and then turns a god into a man, and a woman into a man into a god, and a woman into a goddess, and also a kitty into a lion. So all of this can be put nicely in terms of bhakti too. Get my notes out here so I can take us through this. So basically, Guru Bhakti is one of the main things that Swami Vivekananda would speak about. Next on the list there, Shakti Vandana. By the way, thank you to Vandana, who wrote in today. Vandaniya wrote us a beautiful card. She's listening in on this class. So that's her name there. That's your name, Shakti Vandana. Worship of Divine Mother. He would say so many things. You just don't understand. She's my special thing, even though he was a sannyasin, a monk, and so forth. And other times he'd say, there be no awakening for the world unless Shakti's worshipped. So, like his master, he had a very keen eye towards the presence of Divine Mother and her role in the Kali Yuga of helping to awaken people. As the song can say, even by a touch, because Swamiji experienced that from Sri Ramakrishna when he was in his teens. Just a touch awakened him to a very powerful experience, which he wasn't quite ready at that age to feel the intensity of. But it's much like Arjuna on the battlefield with Sri Krishna. There's even songs written about that. This similarity of the awakening of Arjuna by the touch of Krishna, and the similarity of the awakening of Swamiji by Sri Ramakrishna. There's verses in a song that are comparing those two side by side. So that not that much time has passed, I guess, 5,000 years or 4,000 years since it happened on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and then it happened in Kolkata in India. So this worship of the Divine Mother also can be very nicely sung. And be nice to hear it from somebody like Devendranath Mazumdar, but you could also hear it from somebody as humble as myself when I wrote this. Bhagavati Devi Paramadi Shakti Mahamaya Sanatani Devi Yoganindra Devi Parashakti Devi Nirguna Maheshwari Devi Devi Brahma Mai Lila Mai Devi Sarva Chaitanya Rupa Mahakali Devi Mahalakshmi Triloka Shivani Devi Mahavidya Mahamai Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam. With other verses, there's 4 of those verses. I took 54 or so of the Divine Mother names and put them into these verses. It's at Sri Devi Padam, or the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam Stotram number 3, because I wrote 3 of them. I came across so many beautiful names for the Divine Mother that I ran out of songs. So I put it into 3 different stotrams through a period of some 20 years. But this was the latest one, and these particular verses just put her names together, so I had to come forth with an English translation. O God as Mother, O preeminent and primordial spiritual energy, the eternal source of the twin cosmic forces of projection and withdrawal. You place beings into sleep and meditation and carry them beyond the entanglements of nature. Your supreme powers, both subtle and evident, mark you as the ultimate reality. O formless form of the entire universe, whose enigmatic sport delights and perplexes all beings, your enchanting play captures the hearts of Brahma and other gods. O Mother of the 3 worlds, and the source and origin of their infinite supply as well, thou art transcendent wisdom, residing perfectly in one indivisible existence. Sri Devi Padam, Sri Devi Padam. I take refuge at your feet. I take refuge at your feet over and over again. So all of these verses are coming from Shakti Vandana, devotion to the Divine Mother. And those beings have been living throughout the millennia, throughout the ages, but usually she's behind the scenes so much. A couple of these names are indicative of that hiddenness of her. Like if you were to sing, actually we'll be singing this later tonight when we do our puja, but sing Swami Abhedananda, one of these great devotees of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, sang that about her. Om Laja Patavritti Nicham Shardam Jnana Daike Papebhyuna Sadaraksha Kripa Mai Namostute, full of grace. So Laja Patavritti, she retiring in modest veil, she veiled herself. So she's been doing that throughout the ages, and has come forward now. The new dispensation of Sri Ramakrishna, that's maybe the main facet. But there again, she causes things to look different. You see, oh no, let's make the main facets the universality of all religions, because that's going to be something that's hard for people to realize. So they get rid of their hypocrisy and narrowness and embrace each other, embrace all faiths. That sort of took the fore of Sri Ramakrishna's arrival here. Kali Avatar, we call him, or Matri Avatar. There's beautiful songs about that too. But you'll find out then that even when you try and talk about her, she disappears and retires. And she was that way in the body too. She was very. There was a story about her living at the Dakaneshwar temple for years, and somebody finally found out about her because Sri Ramakrishna was, taking most of the attention. But oh, he has a wife, kind of thing. So basically, they came to the front gate. Somebody one time said, "We want to see Ramakrishna's wife, Sharadama. Is she here?" "Yeah, we've heard she lives here, but we've never seen her." These guards had worked at the gate for years, and they'd never seen her once. Yet she came out every morning to bathe in the river, like 3 a.m, before anyone was there. She was so shy and retiring. So even Vivekananda used to call her a village cat that rolled in ashes. I guess it has a strange color, so other cats were picking on it. So, it would roll in ashes to cover its true nature. Roll in ashes is also something that ascetics do. Shaivites and so forth, and avatutas cover themselves in ashes. So this is very indicative of her retiring nature. But nonetheless, you find, if you go looking, you find these great souls, and they're practicing, as it were, or observing Shakti Vandana. So he was bringing this out quite a bit as one of the facets. Now, it could be said, ox herding, lion taming. Lion taming, do you really have to tame the Atman? Well, do you really have to find the ox? So it's actually, you're taming your ego, basically, for sure. But if you haven't got your realization of your Atman yet, then the taming you should be doing is have to go through purificatory exercises and so forth. And so these could all be certain methods or attributes or qualities that observances, practices, but they tend to indicate a path, like not even a path of succession or a ladder. Just pick one of them, and you have the whole thing contained in one. Like these beautiful samasta chitta, you have to have a universal mind. Or samadarshitvam was one of his favorite words. He said, "I don't believe in humility and all that. I believe in equal vision towards all." So you don't have to have humility or pride unless you've got a problem with arrogance. But how could you have a problem with arrogance when you're in the presence of Divine Mother? And when your Guru's there. See, somebody said recently, when the Guru's in town, there is no inner teacher. There is no inner teacher when the Guru's in town. So, because you have to follow your own voice and all that, but not when the Guru's in town. When Sri Ramakrishna's embodied, you say, forget my inner teacher. There he is. I just need to go and get a good glimpse of him, spend some time with him or her, and the whole thing will become clear in an instant. What can my inner guide do, even so rapidly or so swiftly, that the outer manifestation of God can't do in an instant? So Holy Mother used to say that too. Your Guru is much better than God. All you need is your Guru. That's right here, right now for you, and that's a manifestation. So, Guru Bhakti and Shakti Vandana, I didn't necessarily put these in a ladder of ascension or anything, like I said, but these are how I came upon them, pretty much by mention. If you were to put a little number next to them, It'd be, oh, he mentioned this 12 times, he mentioned this 10 times. So I was actually seeing these things recur in his letters and in his writings, mostly in his letters, because then he was teaching people from a distance, like we're doing right now with the web and all that. And so we're able to take account of all the things he said. Then you had things like kshatriya virya. And of course that's warrior-like strength. In case of Swamiji, it's not hard to find instances of kshatriya virya. And quite often this is noticed by other people too. It wasn't just a matter of blowing one's horn, although there are verses about that too, actually. So, Kshatriya virya and Brahma tejas kind of be taken together. See, Kshatriya virya is this warrior-like strength, and Brahma tejas is God-realized brilliance. Tejas means this light that comes off of a realized soul. An aura, if you will, that they saw, people saw coming off of Lord Buddha. They saw it coming off of Jesus. They saw it coming off of Ramakrishna in modern times. So there's this great, when this Kundalini Shakti rises via this illumination process, touch of one's guru, or just comes to earth already realized, as some of these great souls did, then that's what happens. They shine with this light, this great light. If you're not psychic, if you don't have a psychic temperament, you might not see it, you might feel it. And that, in other terms, you might hear it. It's possible to hear the light and see the sound. In a high state of mind, once I saw notes in the air. The music was playing, but I saw the actual notes forming in the air. So you can see sound, and you can hear things that are usually seen. So if you're next to somebody who's emanating tejas, then that's that attracting power you feel towards that person. And that makes for good holy company, sadhu satsanga, which probably falls down here somewhere too, because he mentioned that a few times. But as far as not being any stranger to tejas and virya, we could sing this about Vivekananda. Harindras chestitai kalagno gayanai parigyan arbudo vadarashi darshanai yatrinjo shakti bir bhavanyam nastikim vivekanandate Prabhate Pranjali Narendra Shashave Narendra Yovane Narendra Kridane Narendra Shikshane Narendra Palane Narendra Hyarpane Vivekanandate Prabhate Pranjali, which translates as, Hail Vivekananda, all excellences abide in thee. Your heroic actions remind us of Hanuman. Your unrivaled detachment marks you as a supreme renunciate. Your music and poetry blend artistry with heartfelt devotion. Your infinite wisdom reflects the state of a vijnani. Profound inner visions mark you as a great rishi. In this auspicious dawn of illumination, O Vivekananda, we offer our reverent salutations. So there you have virya. All those things put together can convince you, no doubt, that this is a great soul. And if you want to go with Brahma Tejas, you'd sing it more like this. Yatinur ashtava pramamam dashati prafulam satpadaha prashunam pravritim tavartam kokilo manogyam kujati vivekanandate prabhate pranjalihi narendra shashave narendra yovane narendra kridane narendra shikshane narendra palane narendra harpane vivekanandate prabhate pranjalihi vivekanandate prabhate pranjalihi. In terms of Brahma Tejas, O great renunciate Vivekananda, this is light, shining with light. Aruna, the Deva of dawn, who grants morning's light, offers you his obeisances. So the whole sun, Aruna, the god of dawn, rises for a perfect soul like that. By reinterpreting and coalescing the four yogas, making them accessible and understandable to humanity, you have destroyed the foundations of ignorance in this age and ushered in a new era. All of nature vibrates with the thrill of new life and spontaneously sings your praises. Like a blooming flower swarmed by bees, all beings are seeking refuge in thee, the perfect man. In this auspicious dawn of illumination, O Vivekananda, we offer you our abundant salutations. So if you want to hear the whole hymn, look on YouTube, as we've placed it up there. It's got thousands of hits. We're very happy with it. So all of these verses, 13 of them in all, you can put them across the board, correlate them with many of these things that he talked about. So he knew what he was talking about. He actually epitomized these things. So when he said them, they bore great power. And if they bore great power, then they transformed people and attracted them, like bees. So his own teacher used to say, when the lotus blooms in the wood, the bees don't need an engraved invitation. It's a God blog I've been meaning to write actually for some time. So when the lotus blooms in the woods, the bees don't need an invitation to come and sip the nectar. So this is what it's like when Vivekananda comes to earth. If you were the fortunate enough to be able to be there when he was on earth, or if you were born in the same time frame as him, Salokya, the same planet, Sarupya, the same form, you have a human form like him, Sayujya, you want liberation like he had, and Samipya, you feel he's very dear to you. Those are the four signs of you coming close to a perfect soul in your existence. So those two, we've knocked down these four with music. How about Ishta, Nishta, one-pointed focus on God? Of course, the teachings there are clarifying in lieu of somebody as great as Sri Ramakrishna, speaking about the greatness of Swamiji, you had somebody who was naturally and spontaneously just seeing the religions of the world and saying, like a little boy, I want that, you see. This is like seeing a toy. I want that. So when Sri Ramakrishna saw any religion, anyone practicing a religion, or heard of any great soul that had founded a religion, he wanted it. So it wasn't like he was trying to prove that these were all from the same, all facets of the same diamond, which it came later. He just wanted to see God in so many different ways as he could, that he would run towards those. And he was a quick study, and he would get them within weeks. The Muslim religion, the vision of Jesus, Moses, I mean, you name it, he was there. And of course all the Hindu deities, a vision of Sita, a vision of Hanuman. Found him in a tree one day acting like a monkey, you see. And he felt like his base of his spine was elongating, like having a tail. And then he spent time concentrating on Hanuman, who is the Virya here, the great strength, the monkey god. So basically, this Ishtanishta is the fruit. That's the fruit of Ishtanishta. It's not like you want to practice too many things at once, and that's what people misunderstand about them. Saying, I think I'll be a universalist, It's a nice vision to have, but you really have to grow into it. And when you look at his life, you see that he practiced one at a time in order to get that fruit. He didn't mix and match kind of thing, which people are sometimes trying to do, and having very upsetting results, especially when she rises. I mean, if the touch of a great soul, if Kundalini starts rising in you, and you're not prepared, or you're spiritually promiscuous, you could say, because here we're putting together two great traditions coming out of the same motherland, that is Mother Bharat, Mother India, then you have to make sure that your methods and your practices are falling in line with your abilities and your capacities. And so this is something that needs to be exemplified, so that these great qualities can mature in you and not get mixed. And you'd be a jumble of undigested spiritual moods, to quote Sri Ramakrishna. Oh, he's a jumble of undigested spiritual moods. So that's not what you want. You want Ishtanishta. And when you get that permission from your Ishtam, all right, like the Buddhas needing to be accepted by other Buddhas. All right, you've reached the Pure Lands. You can now practice this. You can now do this. Until before that, if they don't have the authority of the other Buddhists, and they can't do that. So there's a pecking order in spirituality, inner life too. So that's important to note. There are many, many things I could sing, but I think in the time we'll go on. There's abhaya next, fearlessness. It means bhaya means fear, abhaya means fearlessness. So you have this, Mother Kali is actually one of the mudras on her forearms, is the fearlessness mantra. So if you want to sing about fearlessness in a way that makes it a little bit easier to understand, that's no problem. In our tradition, in Vedantic lion taming, they have all sorts of ways of expressing these beautiful teachings, like, say, this one. Kshina smadina sakaruna jalpanti jana jana Nastikyantvidantu aha devatma badaturah Praptaha shmaviragatabhaya abhayam pratistam yada Astikyantvidantu chinumana Rama Krishna dasavayam. We will crush the stars to atoms. We will unhinge the universe of name and form. Don't you know who we are? We are the children of Sri Ramakrishna. So there's, this is called abhaya pratistam. Pratistam means to be in a steady state. So to be in a steady state of fearlessness is abhaya pratistam. And going on talking about weakness, he says, "It's only the foolish attached to their bodies who piteously cry, 'We are weak, we are lowly.' All this is atheism. Now that we have attained a state beyond fear, we will abide in our immortal nature forever and become heroes." Shining with Brahma-tejas and having that great, all of these qualities. So like I say, this is coming straight from someone who epitomized these and who is then promoting them and trying to encourage us to attain them too. Then next there is ahimsa, or non-aggression. That's of course one of the earliest of all principles in India. It's there in Jainism too, 24 generations before Buddha. They were non-violent, back to the Tirthankaras of Jainism. Mahavir, I think, lived just about the time of Lord Buddha, or just a little before Lord Buddha. He was the 24th of them, so you can trace ahimsa way, way back into the very fiber foundation of Mother India's teachings. So it's very foundational. Non-violence. And moving on, so we use the time in this half, tyaga, mature renunciation. That's also a very powerful, as I mentioned at the beginning of the class. Brahmagyanam, supreme wisdom. That's also easy to sing about in our tradition. And echoing back to the times of Shankara as well. Of course, Brahmagyanam has to be based in the import of a message. So you could sing about it in that way. Jyayam Gitam Arasahasram Jyayam Shripati Rupam Ajasram Deyam Sajana Sange Chitam Deyam Dina Jayanai Shavitam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Mudhamate Samprapte Sanihite Kale Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukrin Karane. And similar, Pranayamam Pratyaharam Nitya Nitya Viveka Vicharam Japya Sameta Samadhi Vidanam Korvam Varanam Mahadavadanam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Mudhamate Samprakte Sanihite Kali Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukrin Karane. Bhaja Govindam. Shankara and his disciples, speaking about lions who shook the world, particularly with their Shaivism based in Advaita and the secret behind them, again, Shakti, because they were Samayachara Tantrasists as well as Advaita Vedantists, so they worship Shiva, and Shankara wrote hymns to the Divine Mother. So this first verse tells us about this, what we're talking about here, this Brahmagyanam and what leads to it. First of all, he says, read the Gita. Recite the Sahasranam, 1,000 names. Meditate daily on the form of the Lord of Lakshmi. It's Vishnu. Interesting for a Shaivite hidden Shakti to say that too. Lead the mind always to holy company, and distribute your wealth constantly among the poor and for good causes. Now join with that. Regulate the breath. Withdraw the senses from their objects. Discriminate well and constantly between the real and the unreal. Nitya nitya viveka vicharam. You must have heard that line go by and recognized it. Discriminate well between the real and the unreal, and control the mind and senses with the recitation of the mantra. Perform all these well with great care and attain to Brahmagyanam. So there's 7, 8 methods right there in 2 verses that he's recommending that people practice. He would tell you, practice having samadhi. Practice having samadhi. It's right there in the Vivekachudamani, in a great scripture, because Shankara was not just a commentator of scriptures, he wrote several dozen of them. So those 2 verses of Bhaja Govindam are very pointed with various teachings. In other words, read the Gita and recite the 1,000 names, and meditate on the Ishtam. Keep holy company, do seva, distribute your wealth to the poor, practice regulation of breath, withdraw senses from your objects, do your viveka and vairagya process, the 4 jewels and 4 treasures and the 6 jewels. That would be out of lion taming, Vedanta. And control the mind and the senses with the mantra. So just on and on you have all of these methods that are pronounced and sung and taught in the scriptures and exemplified by great souls. A little bit behind the scenes, some of that in Zen. But sometimes then you want to have that sweetness of bhakti mixed in with it, and maybe a little less formal way of proceeding. And you also then are still willing to do that and wanting to do that without sacrificing the beautiful nondual thread that's running through everything, or compromising it at all, covering it at all. And that leads us with these final 2 qualities, samasta chitta and samadarshitvam, which I've already mentioned to you, but I haven't sung to you about them. Yeah, and I do have a few ways of singing that too. So samasta chitta is this universal mind. When you hear that word sama, which again is back to the 6 treasures, sama, dhamma, uparate, titiksha, samadana. Sama is run through there, and you'll find it also running through the scripture of Lord Vashishta. Samanvaya Mahacharya is a chant about Sri Ramakrishna, that you're putting together everything into an integrated whole, or it always was an integrated whole. Now you want to take it apart in front of us, put it back together to show us how to do that. See, it's very much like ox herding. Come out of my hut and I mistakenly think my ox is gone, so the picture is not whole to me. But it actually always is whole, but now I have to go through these stages to prove myself that it's whole, prove that to myself. So it's very similar. My teacher, again, Swami Sheshananda, would always be very forceful on his encouragement and emphasis on method. Why, what, where, and when, the W's and so forth. But he said those are rather circular in Maya, but who is a good W. See, who am I? Atma Vichara, just mentioned here. But what most people don't know is how is a very important question. They think that they can just get rid of Maya, what, where, when, and why, and just jump to who am I without how. But the method is very important, And that's why Swami Shishanandaji used to start almost every one of his lectures to us, I'm speaking to the American people. I mean, I wondered why he always repeated that almost every lecture. I am speaking to the American people. I thought maybe he had just kind of gotten into a habit of saying that, standing up in the podium, giving hundreds and hundreds of talks a year for 40 years to us, I'm speaking to the American people, but it's pretty obvious now that he's coming down to speak to us. He's coming down the staircase to speak to us. He can't teach us Advaita yet because we're not ready yet. We'll misunderstand it. Just like Zen sickness. We saw 7 kinds of Zen sickness last week when we looked at that chart. So I am talking to the American people then in this way would mean that you're going to need to practice how. You're going to need a method. Don't think that you can be a Ramana Maharshi, or don't think you can be a Sri Ramakrishna, or don't think you can be a Swami Vivekananda, just like that. By practicing lots of religions, or by saying who over and over again, you're going to have a method that you go through, step-by-step method. And isn't that obvious to you when your life is not reflecting peace, bliss, love, light, and so forth? Where are those things in your daily life? How easy are they compromised? How easy do you fall out of them and lose them? And are you conscious of them at all times, including in dream and deep sleep? Is your ignorance dead? So all of those things should be accounted for, and should be counted for under the umbrella of a method. So until then, you can get to a place where it's obvious, like in the case of Jafar, for instance, if he sings about universal mind and equal vision, he would sing it like this. Jo kucha hai so tu hai, tujhse humne dil ko lagaya. Kya malaika cha insan, kya Hindu, kya Musalman, jaise cha तूने बनाया, जैसे चाहा तूने बनाया, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है, तुझसे हमने दिल को लगाया. He sings on and on. And saying about the same sidedness, he sings, God and Goddess, man and woman, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, all are brought together into existence by thy own inscrutable will, O Lord. What are these beings without you? They all exist in thee. And he goes on singing, Kaaba mein kya, arder mein kya, teri prastis hoyegi sabaja, aage tere shir samone jukaya, aage tere shir sabone jukaya, jo kuch hai so tu hi hai, tujhse humne dil ko lagaya. Churches, temples, Kaaba, you know what the Kaaba is, right? all places of worship. You fashion them and cause all beings to bow down there. You have become the worshipper, the act of worship, and the place of worship. Nothing exists but thee. Matchless is your presence. I have found nothing in the three worlds which compares to it. Contemplating it, this humble sage Jafar has become illumined, and this simple truth has dawned upon his understanding, that nothing whatsoever exists but thee. This is called a ghazal, and so it's mentioned like there's stotrams and there's bhajans, and then there's kirtan, people sing, dance, same thing over and over again. And then there's these ghazals that are these kind of semi-classical songs with very deep spiritual meanings. They always tend to be very non-dual like that. They're not talking about Krishna, not talking about Ram, not talking about Allah, or not talking about any form or religion or method. But it's inferred in the oneness of this. And so there it is, perfectly exemplified, this equal vision towards all beings, whether they go to a church or whether they go to the Kaaba, the Muslims, or whether they go to the temple, or whether they go to the temple. It's the equal visionness of all. The Lord sees it that way. The Lord is the all-seeing eye here. Doesn't have a name, a form, a favorite religion, doesn't take sides in war, all that kind of nonsense. It's this universal all-seeing eye, and it goes together very well then with the universal mind. You might say that you'd have to have some samasta chitta. Chitta means thoughts. Your thoughts would have to be that equal in seeing, and you're going to have a method for that, to make sure that the mirror of your mind is wiped clean each day, Shankara says, in order to get to samadarshitvam, which Vivekananda had in spades. That is this equal vision towards all beings. Same Atman or Bussho in all beings. So here we're going to end for our 15-minute break and come back after to finish up our third class on this series of Zen ox herding and Atmic lion taming. Jai Shri Guru.